were talking about earlier, you talked about doing your 8-bar phrases here and there and taking that up from 0 to where it needs to be.
Right.
Now, do you also do your music that way too? Like take that 8-bar phrase, get it as technically perfect as you can, and then work on that 8-bar phrase's musical line and then move on to the next? Or do you work all the technique and then add the music on top of it?
I'm trying to play musically from the beginning.
Oh, okay.
I imagine when I'm playing that, for instance, meter has consequences for musical inflection. So in a 3/4 bar or a 4/4 bar, not every beat is the same. And so while I'm practicing at a super slow tempo, that's a way for me to internalize where I'm leaning, where I'm going to. And it's also a way for me to figure out how the notes lead to the next bar or to the next note. Is a note a resolution? Is it preparing us for something else? There's a book called Note Grouping by Thurmond, and it talks about in detail, maybe too much detail, but in detail about whether a note in a phrase is leading you somewhere or bringing you back from somewhere. And I think that's a really cool way to think about it. Taking theory courses and understanding theory can also help you in that process. But just watching a melody at the end of a bar, 2 8 notes on the 4th beat usually mean that you're leading to the downbeat. So if you're leading to the downbeat, they wouldn't be as loud as the downbeat. They probably wouldn't be as loud as what came before, generally. Knowing that they're leading you somewhere is helpful to your inflection. And I try and do that right from the beginning. And I talk to my students, I say there are 3 kinds of music. There are fanfares, there are love songs, and there's pirate music. And most of what we play falls somewhere in there. And you can figure that out, and that's got a sort of a style and will inform your type of articulation, your note length, and how you would sing it.
Yeah, a lot of solos are love song, pirate song,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something fast, something slow. And when we're listening to students for auditions and when we have like the sophomore barrier here, we're asking them to do something fast, something slow, right? Some love song and some pirate song. And that will stretch them musically as well.
So earlier you mentioned that you're 7 weeks into this new warm-up routine. Can you talk about that a little bit and like what that entails and how you go about doing it?
I play in this trumpet group called Tromba Mundi. One of the players in that group is named Joey Tartell, and he teaches, he's one of the trumpet teachers at Indiana University. And Joey has done a lot of different things in his career. He played lead on Maynard's band. In our trumpet group, he plays lead, he plays piccolo trumpet, but he also plays bass trumpet, and he plays bass trumpet great. He does a lot of different things really well to a really extreme level, and I know that he's subbed on Brandenburg with the Indianapolis Symphony. So these are like things that are generally not seen in the same player. If somebody can play Brandenburg really beautifully and can play bass trumpet and can play lead trumpet, plays C trumpet, plays cornet solos. So I was sort of curious. I've known him for about just over 10 years now. And so I had the idea that I would go out and spend a week with him. And so I took Bill Stoneman, the teacher at Messiah College, who's also in Tromba Mundi. We went out to spend a week with Joey to find out sort of what Joey is doing. So he does this. It's basically a 2-hour routine in the morning. And it's sort of first thing in the day. So before you got here, I did my 2 hours Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And so it involves long tones throughout the range of the instrument. It's just, I put on the metronome at 50 and just play 4 beats. And I'll just do that. Rest for 4 beats. And this is at 50, not 60. Then you go up a half step. Then you go down a whole step. Then up up a whole step. So it starts there.
Okay.
And it's just that spidering out. We call it spidering out. People call it spiraling out. It's down by half steps, up by half steps, till you're doing low G to G on top of the staff. So it's 2 octaves separated. And then you take that same exercise and you start on tuning note C. And you go to low C and to C above the staff. And then you take that same exercise, you go to G on top of the staff. You go to G in the staff to G above high C. Then you do exactly the same thing. You start on high C and you go from high C down to C on the staff and up to double C. And sometimes those notes come out, sometimes they don't come out. But for my entire playing career and teaching career, I wasn't even accessing those notes at all. I didn't know it was a thing that you were supposed to do every day. So that's the way it starts. That's about 20 minutes. Then there's a break. And then he proceeds through the Clark book. So for all you trumpet folks out there, trumpet cornet players, you really need this book. It's not expensive, but you really need this book. You'll probably find a PDF online as well. So then he proceeds through the Clark book and through the different instruments. So there's a break, and you do Clark number 3 on the C trumpet from low to high. Then you do Clark number 2 on the E flat trumpet from high to low. Then you do Clark number 4 spidering out on the piccolo trumpet. Then you do Clark number 7 on the flugelhorn. Then Clark number 1 on the cornet. So that covers 6 horns, most of the Clark book. Then he does a little range building thing back on the B flat on a different mouthpiece that people would recognize as sort of a lead mouthpiece. And then there's another break, and he does a little bit of, he's been working on his jazz improvisation. So he does like a 5-10 minute little jazz sequence thing. I'm not a jazz player at all, but he explained some things to me, and I've been doing some of that little dabbling. We have a jazz trumpet professor here, George Rabbi, who was Woody Herman's soloist. Yeah, so nobody needs me to teach them how to do jazz improv here. It's not part of what I have to do, but it's interesting for it just to be part of what I do each day. It's an easy, in terms of time, it's not a time crunch in 2 hours. I have been able to compress it down on occasion to about an hour and 35 minutes. So I would suggest that people do something like this that's this intense later in their development. Early in the development, so we're talking about much smaller amounts, but covering all of these areas, single tongue, double tongue. Those long tones are great. All of my students do them. I have students as young as 9th graders who are doing that exercise, and they find it really helpful.